Human Janitor gave his blood to save a dying alien, unaware it would awaken the forgotten Dragon King. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The endless corridors of Nexus Station Alpha gleamed under artificial light, pristine and sterile. Mopping the floor of the alien diplomatic wing was Mike Foster, a 45-year-old janitor with calloused hands and eyes that had long ago stopped looking for adventure among the stars. The soft hum of the station's life support systems provided a rhythmic background to Mike's methodical work. 23 years of cleaning up after the galaxy's most important diplomats had taught him to be invisible. He knew how to fade into the background, to become part of the furniture alongside the waste disposal units and cleaning droids. Being unremarkable was his specialty. But fate had other plans for Mike Foster that day. A commotion erupted at the end of the hallway. The door to the Draconian embassy slid open with a hiss, and a security officer stumbled out, supporting what appeared to be an injured alien diplomat. The Draconian was tall and slender, with iridescent scales that shifted from emerald to sapphire under the station's lights. Its elongated face was contorted in pain, and a thick, golden liquid seeped from a wound in its chest. "Medical emergency," the security officer shouted, his voice echoing through the corridor. "We need a medic here now." Mike pressed himself against the wall, trying to make himself even more invisible than usual. This was not his problem. He was just the janitor, the one who cleaned up messes, not the one who fixed them. But the security officer's eyes locked onto him. "You? Get over here and help me." Mike hesitated, his mop still clutched tightly in his hands. Then, with a resigned sigh, he set it aside and hurried over. "Hold him up," the officer commanded, transferring some of the alien's weight to Mike. Ambassador Kethin collapsed during negotiations. "Medical team is on the way, but we need to get him to the medbay now." The alien, Ambassador Kethin, was surprisingly light despite his tall frame. His scales felt smooth and cool against Mike's skin, almost like polished metal. "What happened to him?" Mike asked as they half-carried, half-dragged the ambassador down the corridor. "Assassination attempt," the officer replied grimly. "Poison dart," aimed at the ARC tourist delegate, but the ambassador pushed him out of the way. Mike glanced at the wounded alien. A diplomat taking a hit for another species? That was unusual in the cutthroat world of interstellar politics. They had almost reached the med bay when Ambassador Kethin began convulsing. His tall frame shook violently, and more golden liquid, blood, Mike realized, poured from the wound. "We're losing him," the officer shouted, just as the medbay doors slid open and a team of medical staff rushed out. What followed was a blur of activity. The ambassador was placed on a hovering stretcher and whisked inside. Mike found himself following, pushed along by the tide of emergency personnel. Inside the medbay, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the station's chief medical officer, was already scanning the ambassador with a diagnostic tool. "It's a synthetic neurotoxin," she announced, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "Designed specifically for draconian physiology. It's breaking down his cellular structure at an accelerated rate." "Can you counteract it?" asked the security officer. Dr. Rodriguez shook her head. "Not with our current supplies. The draconian biochemistry is complex, and this poison is like nothing I've seen before. He needs a blood transfusion to filter out the toxin, but we don't have compatible blood on board." "What about synthetic blood?" someone suggested. "Won't work," the doctor replied. "The ambassador's immune system would reject it immediately. We need real blood with regenerative properties compatible with his system." The room fell silent. Mike, standing awkwardly by the door, felt the weight of impending death in the air. He had seen death before: his father, his mother, even his wife 5 years ago. Cancer, the silent killer that human medicine could still sometimes not defeat, even in the age of interstellar travel. But watching an alien diplomat die from an assassination attempt while he stood by helplessly felt different. It felt wrong. What about human blood? The words left Mike's mouth before he could stop them. Every head in the room turned toward him. Dr. Rodriguez frowned. "Human blood? That's not compatible with draconian physiology. I read something once, Mike continued, surprised at his own boldness, about human blood having unique regenerative properties. Something about our stem cells being more adaptable than other species. Dr. Rodriguez's frown deepened. That's a controversial theory, and it's never been tested on draconians. The risk of rejection is. He's dying anyway, Mike interrupted. What's the harm in trying? The doctor studied Mike for a long moment, then looked back at the ambassador, whose scales were beginning to lose their luster. You're willing to donate? Mike nodded. He wasn't sure why he was doing this. Maybe it was the memory of all those he couldn't save. Maybe it was just the human thing to do. Get him prepped, Dr. Rodriguez ordered her staff. This is highly unorthodox, but we've got nothing to lose. Minutes later, Mike found himself lying on a medical bed next to the ambassador, a tube connecting his arm to the aliens. His blood, bright red against the golden draconian ichor, flowed between them. This probably won't work, Dr. Rodriguez warned as she monitored the process. But I appreciate your willingness to try. Mike simply nodded. He had no illusions about being a hero. He was just a janitor who happened to be in the right place at the right time, or the wrong place at the wrong time, depending on how one looked at it. As his blood entered the ambassador's system, Mike expected some kind of immediate reaction, rejection, perhaps, or even anaphylactic shock. But nothing happened. The ambassador continued to lie still, his breathing shallow. After what seemed like an eternity but was probably only minutes, Dr. Rodriguez announced, "That's enough. Any more could be dangerous for you." The tube was disconnected, and Mike sat up, feeling slightly lightheaded. Did it help? The doctor checked her instruments. No change. I'm sorry, but it was worth trying. Mike nodded, disappointed but not surprised. He had never been able to save anyone before. Why should this be different? He was about to stand up when Ambassador Kethin suddenly gasped. His back arched, and his scales rippled with a wave of color so intense it almost looked like fire spreading across his skin. What's happening? The security officer demanded. Dr. Rodriguez stared at her readings in disbelief. The toxin levels are dropping. His cells are regenerating at an incredible rate. I've never seen anything like this. The ambassador's eyes snapped open. They were vertical slits, like a reptile's, but instead of their normal amber color, they now glowed with a strange reddish light. Blood of the ancients, he whispered, his voice suddenly deeper, more resonant than before. After all these millennia? Then, just as suddenly as he had awakened, Ambassador Kethin fell unconscious again. Is he? Mike began. He's stabilizing, Dr. Rodriguez confirmed, her voice filled with wonder. Your blood didn't just neutralize the toxin. It's actively rebuilding his damaged tissues. This shouldn't be possible. Mike didn't know what to say. He was just glad the ambassador would live. Well, that's good news. Can I go back to work now? Dr. Rodriguez gave him an incredulous look. You just performed what might be the first successful human draconian blood transfusion in history, possibly saving a diplomatic incident in the process, and you want to go back to mopping floors. Put that way, it did sound rather absurd. But that was Mike's life. Extraordinary moments didn't happen to janitors. They happened to heroes and stories. I think I should run some tests on you, the doctor continued. There must be something unusual about your blood to have such a dramatic effect. Before Mike could protest, the security officer's communicator beeped. The officer listened for a moment, his expression growing increasingly alarmed. Doctor, he said urgently, we have a situation. The Draconian High Council is demanding an emergency communication channel. They say their systems detected some kind of ancient protocol activation from Ambassador Kethin. Dr. Rodriguez looked confused. What does that mean? I don't know, the officer admitted. But they sounded afraid. Mike had a sinking feeling in his stomach. The Draconians were one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy. What could possibly frighten them? His thoughts were interrupted as Ambassador Kethin stirred again. This time, when he opened his eyes, they were normal, amber slits that regarded the room with confusion. What happened? He asked, his voice back to its usual tenor. You were poisoned, Dr. Rodriguez explained. This man, she gestured toward Mike, donated blood for a transfusion that saved your life. The ambassador's gaze shifted to Mike, studying him with newfound interest. A human saved me? How unusual and interesting. Mike felt uncomfortable under the ambassador's scrutiny. It was nothing, just doing what anyone would do. I think not, Ambassador Kethen replied softly. My species has a long memory, human. We do not forget debts. You have done me a great service, and I shall not forget it. The way he said it made it sound less like gratitude and more like a warning. Before Mike could respond, the ambassador turned to Dr. Rodriguez. I must contact my government immediately. There are protocols that must be addressed. Your government is already trying to reach you, the security officer informed him. They seemed quite concerned about something called an ancient protocol activation. Ambassador Kethen went very still. They detected it already? That's unexpected. What protocol? Dr. Rodriguez asked. Does it have something to do with the transfusion? Indeed it does, the ambassador replied carefully. But it is a matter of draconian internal security. Nothing for you to worry about. Mike didn't believe him for a second. The ambassador's scales had taken on a subtle shift in pattern, forming intricate designs that hadn't been there before. And though he spoke normally, there was a new undertone to his voice, a resonance that seemed to vibrate in Mike's very bones. Something had changed in Ambassador Kethen. Something profound. The draconian rose from the medical bed with surprising grace for someone who had been near death minutes before. I must use your communication facilities to contact my government. And then, his gaze returned to Mike. I believe I would like to learn more about my savior. Mike's unease grew. There's not much to tell. I'm just the janitor. The ambassador's lips curved in what might have been a smile. Oh, I think there is more to you than meets the eye, human. Much more. 3 hours later, Mike found himself sitting in a small conference room, facing not just Ambassador Kethen, but a holographic projection of 5 elderly draconians who had introduced themselves as the High Council. Their scales were dull with age, but their eyes were sharp with intelligence and what Mike could only describe as fear. This is unprecedented, one of the counselors was saying. The blood markers are unmistakable. The prophecy speaks of blood freely given in the moment of need, and this human fits the description perfectly. It could be a coincidence, another counselor argued. The ancient texts are notoriously cryptic. The protocol was activated, Ambassador Kethen countered. My transformation has begun. You can see the patterns forming already. He tilted his head to show the intricate scale designs that now covered his neck. Mike cleared his throat. Excuse me, but could someone please explain what's going on? What protocol? What prophecy? What transformation? The counselors exchanged glances. Finally, the eldest among them spoke directly to Mike. Human, what do you know of draconian history? Mike shrugged. Not much. You're one of the oldest spacefaring races. You've got colonies in 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. You're known for your diplomatic skills and your technological achievements. All true, but incomplete, the elders said. What you and most other species don't know is that we were not always as we appear now. Once, long ago, we were different. Different how? Ambassador Kethen answered. We were what your legends would call dragons. Not the small, slender forms you see now, but great winged beings of immense power. The fire breathers of your myths. Mike stared at him in disbelief. You expect me to believe that? Whether you believe it or not doesn't change the fact that it is true, the ambassador replied calmly. Our ancestors chose to seal away their true forms and powers. They believed such might was too dangerous, that it led to arrogance and destruction. They used ancient technology and genetic manipulation to lock away our original DNA, becoming the smaller, more diplomatic race you see today. But they left a backdoor, one of the counselors added. A genetic key, activated only under specific conditions. The blood of a specific bloodline, freely given to save a draconian life, would unlock the original genetic code. Mike felt a chill run down his spine. And you think my blood is this key? We know it is, Ambassador Kethen said. I can feel the changes already. The ancient DNA unraveling and reasserting itself. I am becoming what we once were. A dragon, Mike said flatly. Precisely. Mike looked around the room, waiting for someone to laugh, to tell him this was an elaborate joke. But everyone remained deadly serious. So what happens now? He finally asked. According to the ancient texts, the elder counselor said, the transformation will be complete within 1 lunar cycle. Ambassador Kethan will become the first true dragon our species has seen in 10,000 years. And then what? The counselors exchanged another series of glances. It was Ambassador Kethan who answered, then I become the Dragon King, the ruler of all Draconians. It is our oldest law, predating our current democratic system. The return of the dragons signals the return of the monarchy. Mike felt the blood drain from his face. So I've just caused a revolution in one of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations? All because I donated some blood. It was prophesied, the ambassador said simply. You could not have known, but neither could you have avoided it. Destiny brought you to that corridor at that exact moment. Mike didn't believe in destiny. He believed in bad luck, in being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And right now, he was definitely in the wrong place. Look, he said, I'm sorry if I caused some kind of political crisis, but I'm just a janitor. I don't want any part of this dragon business. I'm afraid it's too late for that, Ambassador Kethan said. His voice was still gentle, but there was an unmistakable note of command in it now. The texts are very clear. The one who awakens the Dragon King is bound to him, serving as advisor and friend. The way he hesitated before the word friend made Mike deeply uncomfortable. I already have a job, Mike protested. I can't just abandon my life to become some kind of dragon advisor. Your current employment is of no consequence, Ambassador Kethan dismissed. You will be compensated far beyond what you earn as a menial laborer. That's not the point, Mike insisted. You can't just decide my future for me because of some ancient prophecy. The ambassador's eyes narrowed slightly. I think you fail to grasp the significance of what has occurred. I am becoming the ruler of the most technologically advanced civilization in the known galaxy. Having you by my side is not a request, human. It is a requirement. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Mike swallowed hard, looking to the counselors for support. But their holographic faces showed only resignation. The ambassador is correct, the elder counselor said. The prophecy is clear. The blood giver and the Dragon King are bound together. Such is the way it has always been. Mike felt trapped. He had gone from invisible janitor to the center of an interstellar political crisis in less than a day, all because he had tried to do the right thing. As if reading his thoughts, Ambassador Kethan's expression softened. Do not think of this as a burden, Mike Foster. Think of it as an opportunity. You will witness history being made. You will stand at the side of greatness. Few humans have ever been granted such an honor. Mike wasn't sure honor was the right word. Catastrophe felt more accurate. What if I refuse? He asked, already suspecting the answer. Ambassador Kethan smiled, revealing teeth that seemed sharper than they had been earlier. You won't. The meeting concluded shortly after that ominous statement. Mike was escorted back to his quarters by a security detail that felt more like prison guards than protectors. Once alone in his small room, Mike sank onto his bed, head in his hands. How had his life spiraled so completely out of control in the span of a few hours? All he had wanted was to help someone in need. Now he was entangled in alien politics and ancient prophecies. He considered running, but where would he go? Nexus Station Alpha was isolated in deep space, with the nearest habitable world light years away. And even if he could escape, he doubted the soon-to-be Dragon King would simply let him disappear. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Mike looked up to see a holographic notification hovering above his desk. From Ambassador Kethan, it read. Message begins. The transformation progresses more rapidly than anticipated. I require your presence at the Draconian Embassy at first light. Do not disappoint me. Message ends. Mike stared at the floating words until they faded away. There was no escape, no way out of this situation. He was bound to a being who was rapidly becoming something out of human nightmares. And the most terrifying part was that this was only the beginning. As he lay on his bed that night, sleep eluding him, Mike couldn't help but wonder, what would Ambassador Kethen become when his transformation was complete? And more importantly, what would that mean for the fragile balance of power in the galaxy? Little did he know, events were already in motion that would answer those questions all too soon, and place Mike Foster, the unremarkable janitor, at the center of a galactic conflict unlike anything seen in 10,000 years. Morning came too quickly. Mike had barely slept, his dreams haunted by fire-breathing monsters and ancient prophecies. His uniform felt too tight as he made his way to the Draconian embassy, each step heavier than the last. The embassy doors slid open at his approach, as if expecting him. Inside, the typical austere decoration of the Draconian diplomatic quarters had been replaced by something altogether more primeval. The walls now displayed intricate metallic patterns that mirrored the designs appearing on Ambassador Kethen's scales. The air felt warmer, almost uncomfortably so, and carried an unfamiliar scent, something like cinnamon mixed with ozone. The ambassador awaits in the inner chamber, a Draconian aide informed him, bowing slightly. The gesture struck Mike as odd. Draconian diplomats weren't known for showing deference to station janitors. The inner chamber had been transformed even more dramatically. Gone was the standard meeting room with its conference table and chairs. In its place was a cavernous space with a raised dais at the center, surrounded by glowing runes that pulsed with a rhythmic light. And on the dais stood Ambassador Kethen, or rather, what Ambassador Kethen was becoming. The diplomat had grown at least 2 feet taller since yesterday. His once slender frame had broadened, with powerful muscles visible beneath his iridescent scales. The intricate patterns Mike had noticed were now covering his entire body, glowing with an inner light. Most shocking of all were the small protrusions emerging from his shoulder blades, the beginnings of wings. "Ah, my blood giver arrives," Kethen said, his voice now a deep rumble that seemed to reverberate through Mike's chest. "I was beginning to think you might try to defy destiny." Mike approached cautiously. "I considered it." Kethen laughed, a sound like distant thunder. "Honesty. How refreshing. Most beings would be terrified to admit such thoughts to me now." "I'm plenty terrified," Mike admitted. "I just figure there's no point lying to someone who's turning into a mythological beast, wise as well as honest." Kethen stepped down from the dais, moving with an unsettling grace despite his changing physiology. "That will serve you well in the days to come." Mike noticed that the ambassador now walked with a slight forward lean, as if adjusting to a new center of gravity. "How far along is this transformation of yours?" "Approximately 30% complete, according to our scientists," Kethen replied. "Much faster than the ancient texts suggested. Your blood must be particularly potent." "Lucky me," Mike muttered. "So why did you summon me here?" "Just to show off your new look." Kethen's amber eyes narrowed briefly. Then he smiled, showing teeth that had definitely grown sharper overnight. "No, I called you here because the Draconian High Council is arriving today to witness my transformation. And as my blood giver, you must be present for the ceremony." "What ceremony?" "The acknowledgement," Kethen explained. "It is an ancient ritual where the council formally recognizes the emergence of a Dragon King. It has not been performed in 10 millennia, yet every Draconian knows of it from our most sacred texts." Mike felt a headache forming. "And what does this ceremony involve exactly?" "Nothing too arduous. You will stand by my side. The council will recite the ancient words. I will demonstrate my growing powers. And then all present will swear fealty to me as the rightful ruler of all Draconians." "Including me?" Mike asked, not bothering to hide his displeasure. Kethen regarded him with what might have been amusement. "No, you are my blood giver, not my subject. Your role is different." Before Mike could ask what that meant, the chamber doors opened, and a procession of elderly Draconians entered. These were the same counselors Mike had seen via hologram yesterday, but in person, they appeared even more ancient and frail. They arranged themselves in a semicircle before the dais, their expressions a mixture of awe and trepidation as they beheld Kethin's transformed state. The change progresses swiftly, the eldest counselor observed, faster than the texts foretold. Indeed, Kethin agreed. I can feel the ancient power growing within me hourly. Soon, I will be as our ancestors were in the days of glory. The counselor nodded gravely. Then we must proceed with the acknowledgement without delay. He turned to Mike. Bloodgiver, stand beside your king. Mike hesitated, then reluctantly took his place next to Kethin. Up close, the heat radiating from the ambassador's body was intense, like standing near a furnace. The ceremony began with the counselors chanting in a language Mike didn't recognize. It sounded ancient and guttural, full of harsh consonants and rolling vowels. As they chanted, the runes around the dais glowed brighter. Kethin stepped forward, raising his arms. The patterns on his scales blazed with light, and to Mike's astonishment, small flames danced across the ambassador's fingertips. The fire returns to our blood, Kethin declared. The power of our ancestors flows through my veins once more. The counselors knelt as one. We acknowledge you, Dragon King, they intoned. May your reign restore the glory of the ancient days. Mike remained standing, unsure of what was expected of him. Kethin turned to him, the flames still flickering across his hands. And now, my bloodgiver, the final part of the ceremony. Give me your hand. Mike eyed the flames nervously. Is this going to hurt? Trust me, Kethin said, which was absolutely not an answer. Before Mike could protest further, Kethin grasped his right hand. The heat was searing, but strangely, there was no pain. Instead, Mike felt a tingling sensation spreading up his arm. With this touch, I mark you as mine, Kethin declared. Bound by blood and fire, advisor to the throne, speaker of truth to power. When he released Mike's hand, an intricate pattern had been burned into his palm, a miniature version of the designs on Kethin's scales. What did you do to me? Mike demanded, staring at the mark. I have made you my true Zare, Kethin explained. It is an ancient role, as old as the Dragon Kings themselves. You will stand at my right hand, unbound by the constraints of subject or slave. Your duty is to speak truth when others would offer only flattery, to counsel when others would merely obey, to question when blind loyalty would lead to folly. Mike frowned, examining the mark more closely. And if I don't want this role? Kethin's expression hardened. It is not a matter of want. The prophecy has chosen you, just as it has chosen me. We are bound together now, for better or worse. The true Zare is a position of great honor, the eldest counselor added. In the days of the ancient kings, the word of a true Zare carried weight second only to the king himself. Great, Mike said sarcastically. So I've been promoted from janitor to royal conscience. Do I at least get a pay raise? One of the counselors made a choking sound that might have been suppressed laughter. Kethin merely smiled. You will want for nothing as long as you serve me, he promised. But now, we have more immediate concerns. The news of my transformation has spread faster than anticipated. Already, delegations from other species are requesting audiences. They're afraid, Mike realized aloud. Kethin nodded. As they should be. The return of the Dragon Kings means a shift in the balance of power. For too long, the Draconian people have been content with diplomacy and commerce. We have forgotten what it means to rule. There was something in his tone that made Mike deeply uneasy. And what exactly do you plan to do with all this newfound power? Before Kethin could answer, an aide burst into the chamber. Forgive the interruption, Your Majesty, he said, addressing Kethin with the royal title for the first time. But there's an emergency. A fleet of Arcturus warships has just dropped out of hyperspace. They're demanding to speak with the station commander. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The Arcturians were a militant species, perpetually at odds with the Draconians over territory and resources. It seems our neighbors are not pleased by the news of my ascension, Kethin remarked, surprisingly calm. Well, we should not keep them waiting. Counselors, attend me. True Zare, walk at my right hand. Mike had little choice but to follow as Kethin swept from the chamber, his growing frame commanding attention as they moved through the corridors of the station. Station personnel and visiting aliens alike pressed themselves against walls to make way, staring in awe and fear at the transforming Draconian. They arrived at the central communication hub, where Station Commander Sarah Chun was already engaged in tense dialogue with an Arcturian general. The alien's face, displayed on a large view screen, was chitinous and angular, with compound eyes that glittered like black diamonds. "This is a violation of the Treaty of Deneb," the general was saying. The Draconian Ascension Protocol was specifically banned under Article 7. Its activation constitutes an act of war. Commander Chen looked relieved when Kethen entered. "General Vex, Ambassador Kethen has arrived to address your concerns." The Arcturian's compound eyes shifted to focus on Kethen, widening visibly at the sight of his transformation. "So the rumors are true. You dare to resurrect the Dragon Kings." "Not by choice, General," Kethen replied smoothly. "The ascension was triggered by an unforeseen medical emergency. A human saved my life with a blood transfusion, unaware of the consequences." The general's attention snapped to Mike, who tried not to squirm under the alien's intense gaze. "A human? You expect me to believe this was accident?" "Believe what you wish," Kethen said, his voice hardening. "But know this, the ascension has begun. Within days, I will complete my transformation. The Dragon Kings return to the galaxy, whether you approve or not." "This is unacceptable," General Vex hissed. "The Arcturus Collective remembers the tyranny of the Dragon Kings. We will not stand by while you resurrect a regime that once burned our worlds to ash." "What exactly are you threatening, General?" Commander Chun interjected, her professional demeanor barely concealing her alarm. "The Collective has dispatched a battle fleet," Vex declared. "If the Draconian delegation does not immediately leave Nexus Station Alpha and submit to containment protocols as specified in the treaty, we will have no choice but to neutralize the threat by any means necessary." Mike felt the blood drain from his face. "They're threatening to attack the station," he whispered to Kethen. "There are 10,000 civilians here." Kethen's expression remained impassive. "And how long before your fleet arrives, General?" 24 hours, Vex replied. "Evacuation of non-essential personnel should begin immediately." With that ominous statement, the communication ended, the screen going dark. Commander Chun turned to Kethen, her composure finally breaking. "Do you realize what you've done? You've brought us to the brink of war. The Arcturians were always going to react this way." Kethen replied dismissively. "They have feared the return of the Dragon Kings for millennia." "With good reason, apparently," Mike interjected, the mark on his palm tingling as he spoke. "You don't seem particularly bothered by the prospect of interstellar war." Kethen turned to him, eyes narrowing. "You speak boldly for someone so new to galactic politics." "That's literally the job you just gave me," Mike retorted. "Truth's there, remember? And the truth is, you're putting thousands of innocent lives at risk because of your destiny complex." A tense silence fell over the room. The Draconian counselors looked horrified at Mike's insubordination. Commander Chen watched the exchange with growing concern. Surprisingly, Kethen laughed. "You embrace your role quickly, Truth's there. Very well. What would you have me do? Submit to the Arcturians? Allow them to imprison me, experiment on me, perhaps destroy what I am becoming? The ascension cannot be reversed." "Then leave the station," Mike suggested. "Go somewhere uninhabited. Complete your transformation away from civilians. And allow the Arcturians to hunt me down when I am still vulnerable? I think not. So what's your plan?" Mike pressed. "Fight an Arcturian battle fleet with diplomatic immunity?" Kethen smiled, and there was something predatory in the expression. "I have a better idea. Commander Chun, I formally request asylum for myself and the Draconian delegation under Section 12 of the Nexus Accords. As a diplomat facing persecution based on biological status, I am entitled to protection." Commander Chen looked stunned. "That section was designed for refugees, not." "The law makes no such distinction," Kethen interrupted. "And I believe Earth itself is a signatory to the Accords. Would you have humanity's representatives violate their own treaty?" Chen's jaw tightened. I'll need to consult with Earth Central. By all means, Kethan agreed. In the meantime, I suggest you begin evacuating non-essential personnel, as General Vex recommended. My delegation will assist in any way we can. As Commander Chin turned away to make the necessary arrangements, Mike pulled Kethan aside. This is insane. You're gambling with people's lives. I'm protecting my own, Kethan countered. The Arcturians would destroy me without hesitation. They fear what I represent, the return of draconian dominance. And is that what you want? Dominance? Kethan considered the question, the patterns on his scales shifting subtly. What I want is irrelevant. The prophecy speaks of a dragon king who will unite the stars under one rule. Peace through power. That's not peace, Mike argued. That's subjugation. A semantics argument for scholars, Kethan dismissed. The galaxy has been fractured for too long. Petty conflicts, resource disputes, territorial squabbles. A strong central authority could end all that. With you as that authority. Who better? I am becoming something greater than any single species. Neither fully draconian nor fully dragon, but a synthesis of ancient power and modern wisdom. Mike shook his head. You're starting to sound like every dictator in human history. Perhaps your human dictators had the right idea, but lacked the power to implement their vision, Kethan suggested. I will not have that limitation. The conversation was interrupted as alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red emergency lights pulsed along the corridors. Attention, all personnel, Commander Chin's voice announced over the intercom. This is not a drill. Evacuation protocols are now in effect. All non-essential personnel report to designated evacuation points immediately. This is not a drill. It seems the commander is taking the Arcturian threat seriously, Kethan observed. At least someone is, Mike muttered. The next few hours were chaos. The station's normal population of 10,000 quickly dwindled as evacuation ships departed for the nearest safe harbors. Mike found himself helping with the evacuation, directing frightened civilians to the appropriate shuttles. It felt good to be useful, to return to a simple, straightforward task instead of dealing with ancient prophecies and interspecies politics. For a brief time, he was just Mike Foster again, not a truth-sayer or blood-giver, but a man doing his job. But as the evacuation progressed, Mike noticed something odd. The Draconian delegation was not evacuating. Instead, more Draconians were arriving on small, unmarked ships that docked at the station's auxiliary ports. During a brief break, Mike sought out Dr. Elena Rodriguez, who was overseeing the medical aspects of the evacuation. Have you noticed the Draconians? He asked her. They're bringing people in, not taking them out. Dr. Rodriguez nodded grimly. Commander Chin noticed too. They claimed their additional diplomatic staff entitled to asylum. But some of the new arrivals look more like military than diplomats. Kethan's planning something, Mike realized. This isn't just about completing his transformation safely. He's turning the station into a fortress. There's more, Dr. Rodriguez said, lowering her voice. I've been monitoring Ambassador Kethan's transformation remotely. The rate of change is accelerating exponentially. At the current pace, he'll be fully transformed within hours, not days. Mike felt a chill run down his spine. Does Commander Chin know? I've informed her. But with the evacuation and the approaching Arcturian fleet, there's not much she can do. Most of our security personnel have been reassigned to evacuation duty. Mike glanced down at the mark on his palm, which had begun to pulse with a faint light. I need to talk to him. Maybe I can reason with him before it's too late. Dr. Rodriguez looked skeptical. Be careful, Mike. Whatever he's becoming, it's not the Ambassador Kethan we knew. I know, Mike said. But apparently I'm his truth-sayer now. If anyone has a chance of getting through to him, it's me. He found Kethan in the station's observation dome, staring out at the stars. The transformation had progressed even further. Kethan now stood nearly 9 feet tall, his shoulders broader, his frame more powerful. The wing protrusions from his back had extended into small, membranous appendages. His face had elongated into a more reptilian muzzle, and small horns curved back from his forehead. Admiring the view? Mike asked as he approached. Kethan didn't turn. When you've lived as long as I have, You learn to appreciate the constants in the universe. Stars don't change. They endure. Stars die too, Mike pointed out. They explode, collapse, fade away. Now Kethan did turn, his amber eyes regarding Mike with amusement. Ever the truths there? Yes, even stars die, but on a timescale beyond the comprehension of most beings. To all but the most ancient civilizations, they might as well be eternal. Is that how you see yourself now? Eternal. I see myself as necessary, Kethan replied. A corrective to the chaos of the galaxy. A return to proper order. Mike decided to be direct. I know you're bringing in reinforcements. Military personnel disguised as diplomatic staff. You're preparing for a confrontation with the Arcturians. Kethan didn't deny it. The Arcturians have made their intentions clear. They mean to destroy me before my transformation is complete. I merely take prudent precautions. This station is supposed to be neutral ground, Mike argued. A place for peaceful negotiation between species. You're turning it into a battlefield. The Arcturians made that choice, not I, Kethan said. They could have accepted the inevitable. Instead, they choose resistance. And what happens to the humans still on board? The medical staff, the security teams, the engineers needed to keep the station running. Collateral damage is sometimes unavoidable in times of conflict. Mike's mark burned hot against his palm. That's not acceptable. No. Kethan turned fully to face him, his transformed visage terrifying in its alienness. And what would you suggest, Truvzer? That I surrender myself to the Arcturians? That I abandon the destiny written in my very blood, in our blood? I suggest you remember what it was that triggered your transformation in the first place, Mike said. I gave you my blood to save your life, not to start a war. You were a diplomat before all this, someone who believed in peaceful solutions. I was weak before, Kethan hissed, constrained by the limitations of my diminished form. Now I am becoming what I was always meant to be. And what exactly is that? A tyrant? A conqueror? A king, Kethan said simply. One who will bring order to a chaotic galaxy. At what cost? Mike pressed. How many lives are you willing to sacrifice for this order of yours? Something shifted in Kethan's expression, a momentary doubt that was quickly suppressed. The ancient texts speak of necessary sacrifices. The ancient texts were written by beings who thought burning worlds was an acceptable military strategy, Mike countered. Is that really the legacy you want to revive? Before Kethan could respond, Commander Chen's voice came over the intercom. Attention, all remaining personnel. Long-range sensors have detected the Arcturian battle fleet. They have accelerated and will arrive within 2 hours. All final evacuation ships must depart immediately. Repeat. All evacuation ships must depart immediately. Kethan's scales rippled with a wave of color. It seems our time for philosophical debates has run out, Truvzer. The Arcturians have made their choice. Now I must make mine. There's still time to avoid this, Mike insisted. You could take a shuttle, leave the station, draw the Arcturians away from the civilians still on board, and abandon my people. Kethan gestured toward the lower levels, where the draconian reinforcements were gathering. No, the line must be drawn here. The Arcturians will learn that the Dragon Kings are not to be trifled with. Mike felt a deep sense of failure. Despite his role as Truvzer, despite all his arguments, he had been unable to sway Kethan from his course. The station, and all those who remained aboard, were now caught between a transforming Dragon King and an approaching alien armada. Then I have nothing more to say to you, Mike said quietly, except that I regret ever giving you my blood. He turned to leave, but Kethan's voice stopped him. Where do you think you're going, Truvzer? To help with the final evacuations, Mike replied without turning back. Someone needs to make sure as many people as possible get off this station before it becomes a war zone. Your place is at my side, Kethan reminded him. The blood bond demands it. Now Mike did turn, holding up his marked palm. This doesn't make me your property. I'm still my own person, with my own choices. And I choose to help those who can't help themselves. For a moment, Kethan looked as if he might force the issue. A flicker of flame danced between his fingers, and his eyes narrowed dangerously. Then, Surprisingly, he nodded. Go then. Aid your fellow humans. But know this, Mike Foster. When the battle comes, you will feel the pull of our connection, and you will return to me. Mike said nothing more. He left the observation dome and headed for the evacuation points, trying to ignore the burning sensation in his palm that grew more intense with each step he took away from Kethin. The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Mike worked alongside the remaining station crew, helping the last civilians board the final evacuation shuttles. Dr. Rodriguez was among the last to leave. You need to come with us, Mike, she urged as they stood at the airlock. The Arcturians will show no mercy once they engage the Draconians. I can't leave yet, Mike told her. There are still people who need help. It wasn't entirely a lie. There were indeed still humans aboard, essential engineering staff, security personnel, and Commander Chen herself. But Mike knew his reluctance to leave had another source. The mark on his palm, which now glowed with an inner fire that matched the patterns on Kethin's scales. Dr. Rodriguez seemed to understand. She placed a hand on his shoulder. The blood transfusion created some kind of psychic link between you and the ambassador, didn't it? Mike nodded. I can feel him. His emotions, his transformation. It's like a pull I can't resist. That's the dragon DNA in your blood responding to his, she theorized. A symbiotic connection. More like parasitic, Mike muttered. Dr. Rodriguez's expression was sympathetic. Whatever happens, Mike, remember, it was your humanity that started this, your compassion for a dying being. Hold on to that. It might be important in what's to come. With those cryptic words, she boarded the shuttle. Mike watched as the airlock sealed and the shuttle detached from the station, joining the stream of evacuation craft heading for the nearby jump point. He was still standing there when Commander Chen found him. Foster, I thought you'd evacuated. Mike shook his head. Couldn't leave. Not yet. Chen studied him for a moment, then nodded. The mark on your hand. Dr. Rodriguez briefed me about your connection to Ambassador Kethin. He's not really an ambassador anymore, Mike said. More like a warlord in waiting. That's what I wanted to talk to you about, Chen said, lowering her voice. The Arcturian fleet will be here within 30 minutes. They've ignored all hails and refused to negotiate. They mean to destroy the station with Kethin on it. Mike felt his heart sink. And everyone else aboard. Exactly. I've ordered all remaining human personnel to the emergency escape pods. But I need someone to talk to Kethin, to make him understand the gravity of the situation. He might listen to you. I've tried, Mike told her. He's convinced this confrontation is necessary, part of his destiny as the Dragon King. Chen's expression hardened. Then perhaps it's time for a different approach. Come with me. She led him to the station's command center, which was now staffed by a skeleton crew of nervous-looking officers. On the main view screen, the approaching Arcturian fleet was visible, 15 warships in attack formation. Open a channel to Ambassador Kethin, Chen ordered. Kethin's face appeared on a secondary screen. The transformation had progressed even further. His features were now almost completely draconic, with a elongated snout, ridge of horns, and scales that shimmered with internal fire. Commander Chen, he acknowledged. Have you come to surrender the station to my protection? I've come to show you something, Chen replied, nodding to one of her officers. The main view screen changed to show a different image, a massive object moving into position behind the station, previously hidden from both the Draconians and the approaching Arcturians. Do you recognize this? Chen asked. Kethin's eyes widened. A Terran dreadnought. The ETS Invictus. Correct, Chen confirmed. The Invictus has been shadowing Nexus Station Alpha since we received reports of unusual Draconian activity. It carries enough firepower to destroy both your forces and the Arcturian fleet. Mike stared at the enormous human warship in shock. He had no idea Earth possessed military vessels of that size. You would side with the Arcturians against me? Kethin demanded, flames now visibly flickering around his head. I'm not siding with anyone, Chen stated firmly. My duty is to protect this station and uphold the Nexus Accords. If either you or the Arcturians initiate hostile action, the Invictus will respond. Is that clear? Kethin's expression was thunderous. You play a dangerous game, Commander. No games, Chen replied. Just diplomacy backed by strength, something you should understand. The communication ended. Chen turned to Mike with a grim smile. That should give him something to think about. Will it be enough? Mike asked. He's convinced of his destiny, and the Arcturians seem equally determined. That's where you come in, Chen said. I need you to go to him, use your connection. Make him see reason. Mike glanced down at the glowing mark on his palm. And if I can't, then get to an escape pod, Chen told him. Because if diplomacy fails, the Invictus has orders to target both fleets, and potentially the station itself, if necessary to prevent a Dragon King from emerging. The implications were clear. Earth was willing to destroy Nexus Station Alpha rather than allow Kethin to complete his transformation and potentially start a galactic war. I'll do what I can, Mike promised, already heading for the door. But I make no guarantees. None expected, Chen replied. Just do your best, Janitor Foster. The use of his old title made Mike smile despite the dire situation. It reminded him of who he really was, not a truthsayer or a blood-giver or a pawn in some ancient prophecy, but simply Mike Foster, a man who cleaned up messes for a living. And this was certainly the biggest mess he'd ever encountered. He found Kethin in the central atrium of the Draconian embassy, surrounded by his counselors and the military reinforcements that had arrived. The Dragon King-to-be had grown even larger, now standing nearly 12 feet tall. His wings were fully formed, though still folded against his back in the confined space of the station. Heat radiated from his body, making the air shimmer around him. Ah, the prodigal Truthsayer returns, Kethin rumbled as Mike approached. Have you come to witness my triumph? I've come to stop a massacre, Mike replied. Commander Chen showed me the Terran dreadnought. This has gone too far, Kethin. Too many innocent lives are at stake. The humans are bluffing, one of the military advisors insisted. They would not risk destroying the station. They absolutely would, Mike countered. They'll sacrifice this entire station before they allow a Dragon King to emerge and potentially start a galactic war. Kethin studied Mike intently, perhaps sensing the truth through their blood bond. Even if what you say is true, I cannot back down now. The transformation is nearly complete. Soon, I will ascend to my true form. And then what? Mike demanded. You'll be dead, along with everyone else on this station. Is that the legacy you want? To be the Dragon King who ruled for 5 minutes before being atomized by 3 different species. Kethin's eyes narrowed. What would you have me do? Surrender to the Arcturians? I would have you remember who you were, Mike said, stepping closer despite the intense heat. A diplomat. Someone who solved problems with words, not fire. That was a lesser being, Kethin dismissed. A shadow of what I am becoming. No, Mike insisted. That was you, the real you. This. He gestured at Kethin's transformed state. This is just genetic memory and ancient programming. It's not destiny. It's just old DNA reasserting itself. Something flickered in Kethin's eyes. Doubt, perhaps. But before he could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. The Arcturian fleet has opened fire, announced one of the Draconian officers. Their weapons are locked on our section of the station. Return fire, Kethin commanded. Show them the folly of attacking a Dragon King. No, Mike shouted, stepping between Kethin and his officers. That's exactly what they want. They're trying to provoke you into attacking to justify the destruction of this entire station. He speaks wisely, Your Majesty, said the eldest counselor unexpectedly. The humans have positioned their dreadnought. If we engage the Arcturians, we invite our own destruction. Kethin hesitated, flames dancing across his scales as his anger warred with his still-present diplomatic instincts. The station shuddered as Arcturian weapons fire impacted the shields. Shield integrity at 70%, reported an officer. We cannot withstand sustained bombardment. Mike looked at the mark on his palm, which now burned so brightly it illuminated the room. An idea struck him, desperate, possibly suicidal, but maybe their only chance. The blood bond, he said suddenly. It works both ways, doesn't it? Kethin looked at him in confusion. What do you mean? My blood triggered your transformation, Mike explained. It contains something your species has been waiting for, some kind of genetic key. But what happens if you give some of that blood back to me? Impossible, one of the counselors protested. The ancient texts speak only of the blood giver's influence on the king, not the reverse. The texts are 10,000 years old, Mike countered, and they didn't anticipate a human blood donor. We're making this up as we go along. Another impact rocked the station. Shields at 50%, came the update. The human dreadnought is powering weapons. They've issued an ultimatum: cease hostilities or face destruction. Kethin's expression was conflicted. For the first time since his transformation began, he seemed uncertain. What exactly are you proposing, Truthzare? Give me some of your blood, Mike said. Complete the circle. Maybe it will give me the power to influence you more directly, to help you control the transformation instead of being controlled by it. Or it could kill you, Kethin pointed out. Dragon blood is highly toxic to most species. I'm willing to take that risk, Mike said. My blood didn't kill you, did it? The station shuddered again, more violently this time. Shields at 30%. Structural damage reported in sections 7 through 12. Kethin looked from Mike to his counselors, then back again. The Truthsayer's proposal is unorthodox, but these are unprecedented circumstances. It is forbidden, one counselor protested. I am the Dragon King, Kethin replied, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority. I decide what is forbidden. With a swift motion, he extended one clawed hand and sliced his own palm open. Golden blood, now streaked with swirling patterns of fire, welled up from the wound. Your hand, he commanded Mike. Mike held out his right hand, the one bearing the Truthsayer's mark. Kethin pressed his bleeding palm against it. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. Fire seemed to pour into Mike's veins, racing up his arm and spreading throughout his body. He fell to his knees, gasping. Visions flooded his mind, memories that weren't his own. The glory of ancient Draconia, when dragons ruled the skies of 100 worlds. The terrible wars that followed, as the Dragon King's ambition and arrogance led them to conquest after conquest. The suffering of countless species under draconic rule. And finally, the decision by the Draconians themselves to seal away their true forms, recognizing that such power led only to destruction. You see it now, Kethin said softly, his voice penetrating the visions. The greatness that was once ours. I see the devastation you caused, Mike gasped. The reason your ancestors chose to change. It wasn't weakness, Kethin. It was wisdom. Another impact struck the station, this one hard enough to throw several Draconians off their feet. Shields failing, came the dire report. Hull breach imminent. Kethin helped Mike stand, supporting him with one massive clawed hand. What would you have me do, Truthzare? I cannot stop the transformation. It is too far advanced. Mike looked up at him, seeing not just the fearsome Dragon King, but also the diplomat who had once taken a poisoned dart meant for another. That person, that capacity for sacrifice, still existed within the monster Kethin was becoming. You can choose what you become, Mike said, his voice stronger now as the initial shock of the blood exchange faded. The DNA doesn't dictate your actions or your choices. You're still Ambassador Kethin, even in this form. Something shifted in Kethin's eyes. The flames that had been raging across his scales began to subside slightly. And what would Ambassador Kethin do in this situation? He asked, genuinely seeking guidance. He would find a diplomatic solution, Mike replied. One that respects the fears of the Arcturians while preserving the dignity of the Draconians. The mark on Mike's palm was changing, the pattern becoming more complex, intertwining with Kethin's blood that now flowed within him. He could feel a connection to the Dragon King that went beyond physical proximity, a meeting of minds, a sharing of perspectives. And through that connection, he could feel Kethin's internal struggle, the pull of ancient draconic instincts toward domination and conquest warring with the diplomatic wisdom acquired over a lifetime of service. Let me help you, Mike said, placing his marked palm on Kethin's chest, over his heart. Let me be your truthsayer and more than just name. Kethin covered Mike's hand with his own. Do what you must. Mike closed his eyes, focusing on the connection between them. Through it, he poured everything that made him human, his compassion, his pragmatism, his ability to see beyond ancient grudges and prophesied destinies. He showed Kethin another vision, a galaxy where a dragon king led through wisdom rather than fear, where ancient power was tempered by modern restraint, where the Draconians regained their heritage without repeating the mistakes of the past. This is what you could be, Mike whispered. Not a conqueror, but a mediator. Not a tyrant, but a guardian. The station rocked with another impact, nearly throwing them both off balance. Final shield failure, announced the officer. Direct impacts imminent. The human dreadnought is locking weapons on both our position and the Arcturian fleet. Kethin opened his eyes, which now glowed not with the fire of conquest, but with a steady, determined light. Open a channel to the Arcturian fleet, he commanded. And to the Terran dreadnought. Your Majesty? One of the officers questioned. Do it, Kethin ordered. It is time for diplomacy, not war. Moments later, the faces of both General Vex of the Arcturians and Admiral Chun of the Terran dreadnought appeared on screens before them. This is Ambassador. No, King Kethin of the Draconians. Kethin began. I propose an immediate cessation of hostilities and the commencement of trilateral peace talks. Peace talks? General Vex scoffed. With a Dragon King? Your kind knows only conquest. The old kings, perhaps, Kethin conceded. But I am something new. Neither fully dragon nor fully modern draconian, but a synthesis. I have the power of my ancestors, but the wisdom to use it differently. Pretty words, Admiral Chun said skeptically. But words alone aren't enough. What guarantees do we have that once your transformation is complete, you won't revert to the ways of the ancient kings? Kethin looked at Mike, who nodded encouragingly. I offer two guarantees. First, I formally renounce any claim to galactic dominion based on my status as Dragon King. The Draconian Confederation will remain a democratic entity, with the monarchy serving as a constitutional figurehead only. This pronouncement caused a stir among the counselors, but none dared contradict him. Second, Kethin continued, I will retain my truthsayer, Mike Foster of Earth, as a permanent advisor and conscience. His human perspective will ensure that I never lose sight of the impact of my actions on other species. Mike blinked in surprise. This wasn't what he had expected. A human advisor? General Vex sounded skeptical. How does that guarantee anything? Because our blood bond works both ways now, Kethin explained. He has shared his blood with me, and I with him. We are connected at a fundamental level. Neither of us can act without the other feeling the consequences. Admiral Chun looked thoughtful. A human conscience for a Dragon King. Interesting concept. It is more than a concept, Kethin insisted. It is already reality. Even now, his influence tempers my draconic instincts. Without him, I might indeed have become the conqueror you fear. The Admiral and the General exchanged glances through their respective screens. I propose a 48-hour ceasefire, Admiral Chun finally said, during which time representatives from Earth, Arcturus, and Draconia will meet on the neutral ground of my vessel to negotiate terms for coexistence with a constitutional Dragon King. Acceptable, Kethin agreed immediately. General Vex hesitated longer, his compound eyes shifting as he considered the proposal. The collective will agree to the ceasefire and negotiations, but we reserve the right to resume hostilities if the talks fail. Understood, Kethin acknowledged. I look forward to proving that my transformation need not be a cause for war. As the communications ended, the tension in the room palpably decreased. The Draconian officers looked relieved, though some of the military personnel seemed disappointed at the lost opportunity for combat. Kethin turned to Mike. Well, Truthsayer, does this meet with your approval? Mike nodded, still somewhat dazed by the exchange of blood and the psychic connection it had created. It's a start, but you know the Arcturians won't be easily convinced. Which is why I need you by my side during the negotiations, Kethin said. Your human perspective, your truth, will be essential. And after the negotiations? You mentioned me being a permanent advisor. Don't I get a say in that? Kethin's expression softened, becoming more like the diplomat he had once been despite his now fully draconic appearance. Of course you do. I would never force you to remain against your will, but I hope you will consider it. Few beings have ever had the opportunity to help shape the rebirth of an ancient kingship. Mike looked down at the mark on his palm, which had evolved into a complex pattern that somehow represented both of them, human and dragon intertwined. I'll think about it. But first, let's make sure we survive these negotiations. 2 days later, Mike stood on the observation deck of the Terran dreadnought Invictus, watching as representatives from a dozen species filed into the main conference room. The news of a Dragon King's emergence had spread throughout the galaxy, causing both panic and fascination in equal measure. Kethin's transformation was now complete. He stood over 15 feet tall, with powerful wings folded against his back and scales that shifted from emerald to sapphire, depending on the light. He was magnificent and terrifying, a being of myth made real. Yet for all his physical transformation, the diplomatic skills that had made him an effective ambassador remained. Throughout the preliminary talks, he had been patient, reasonable, and willing to compromise. The mark on Mike's palm told him that this wasn't just a facade. Kethin genuinely wished for peace. Nervous? Kethin asked, noticing Mike's contemplative mood. A bit, Mike admitted. 2 days ago, I was a janitor. Now I'm helping negotiate a treaty that could reshape galactic politics. You undersell yourself, Kethin rumbled. You were never just a janitor. You were a man of compassion and principle, rare qualities in any species. That's why the prophecy chose you. Mike smiled wryly. I thought it was just random chance. Wrong place, wrong time. There is no such thing as random chance in matters of destiny, Kethin replied. Your human blood contained exactly what was needed to awaken me. And more importantly, your human heart contained the wisdom to guide me once awakened. Before Mike could respond, Admiral Chen approached them. It's time. The representatives are assembled. Kethin nodded. Then let us not keep them waiting. As they walked toward the conference room, Mike felt a strange sense of rightness. The mark on his palm no longer burned. Instead, it pulsed with a comforting warmth. The connection between him and Kethin had stabilized into something balanced, neither human nor dragon dominant, but a partnership of equals. You know, Mike said as they paused before the conference room doors, when I gave you my blood, I was just trying to save a life. I had no idea I was starting a revolution. Kethin's eyes twinkled with amusement. The greatest changes often come from the simplest acts of kindness. That, perhaps, is the most profound truth you have shown me, Truth Zare. The doors opened, and together, the Dragon King and his human advisor, they stepped forward to face the future they had created. Not a future of conquest and subjugation, as the ancient prophecies might have foretold, but one of cooperation and understanding. A future where the power of the dragons would be tempered by the wisdom of humanity, creating something greater than either could achieve alone. All because a janitor had given his blood to save a dying alien, unaware it would awaken the forgotten Dragon King. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.